And also, what is not known, this is something that's not in the book, they get the high academic performance by heavy use of a corporal punishment. This is something you don't hear about often. Some of the kids have been whipped so hard that they have actually died. And now you might say, well, don't the parents sue? In the land of Japan, no parent would sue a teacher who whips his child. Now there was a case where they're in the baseball leagues. Some manager got mad at a player and he socked the player. The player went to court, and the judge ruled that the player had provoked the manager's sock, and therefore the player was wrong. The manager was right in socking him. Now, that could hardly happen here in the United States. But basically, the man at the top, his word, his law, and you conform. The Japanese frown heavily on homeschooling. Again, for one thing though, their kids perform highly. However, there's a lot of misery. They have a very high suicide rate among their young people. You've heard that too. And a lot of time, and this will make world news, the kids will get together online and they agree, you go here and commit suicide at a certain time. At this certain time, we're all going to commit suicide in various parts of the country. So one of them will go to this place, and another will go to that place, and they synchronize their watches. And at the appointed time, they commit mass suicide. And the problem is there's no, a sheer lack of religion, which, maybe some of you have no religious convictions, but a lot of times lack of religious convictions in young people leads to utter, total purposelessness in life. And again, some people blame their lack of religion for their unhappiness, but they have the highest suicide rate in the world, particularly among young people.
Because they value education too much.
That is a lot of it. And if you fall short, now in our country, a lot of our students who dropped out of high school because they couldn't compete can go on and still make a success of themselves. And if you fail here in college, number one, you have a chance to try again. Or number two, you might succeed somewhere else. Hey, Elvis Presley, we have a story after Elvis Presley was told by a famous recording artist, you go home and you drive a truck. You don't have any musical talent. Have you ever heard it? Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley got in his car and he cried all the way home. And shortly afterwards, some recording company cut one of his records, and it sold 1 million copies. Michael Jordan, I think I've told you, was cut from his junior high basketball team, for incompetence, 2 times. He did not commit suicide. He went on to try out a 3rd time, and this time, the 3rd time. Again, story after story like this. Some authors have been told, you'll never make actors, you'll never make it in the acting world. You're just not good enough, you don't have what it takes. And they made it. But in Japan, if you don't make it in the academic world, you're looked on as being inferior, worthless, washed up. And a lot of them do commit suicide because they just don't feel like they're good enough. Homework, lots of it. Corporal punishment, lots of it. Exact behavior standards, which they must conform to. No acting out. The average school year in Japan is 240 days. That's 60 days longer than ours, folks. Which basically means that they go to school basically 180.
But I think go every day.
Year round. They have about a month off. And then they go to the next grade. But their school year, our school year is 180 days. Theirs is 240 days. Now, folk, I'm not saying this is good. In fact, I don't agree. But a child does better if he has time to just sit and daydream and relax a bit, or go out and play with the other children, rather than spend all his time learning his multiplication facts or learning history facts. There's a place for all this. But I can't say that this exacting standard makes them a better place or a better country. All right. Oh yes, Sokagaki. I'm going to write that. Sokagaki. That is the cult that a lot of the young people go into to make up for the religious void that they. In other words, the religious convictions are lacking.
They're more spiritual.
It is, it's a more spiritual form of religious expression than their traditional religion.
So what is Soka Gakki?
It's a mystical type of, some of you might know more about it now. The book doesn't adequately define, but it's more into mysticism. Well, it's like the Chinese. So what the Chinese who thought Confucius didn't offer enough spiritually, they wound up embracing Taoism because it's more, I mean, let's face it, mankind is incurably religious. And a lot of times if the parents are indifferent, their children turn out to be fanatical. Now, if you haven't seen that yet, you will if you live long enough. But if the children are fanatical, I mean, if the parents are fanatical, the children turn out to be somewhat more indifferent. And a lot of people hunger for a more spiritual, mystical type of religious experience that can sometimes be found in traditional religions, particularly Shintoism. Shintoism, in fact, in the case of Confucius, we're not even sure if Confucius believed that there's a God. That's how devoid it was of anything spiritual. And then also in the case of Confucius, and this is in the book, in the first, when a mother loses her child to a disease, there's no comfort for her offered in Confucianism. And sometimes you'll seek out something like Taoism, which offers some form of afterlife or spiritual experience that would give her comfort in time of grieving for a lost child. Again, this is all part of life. Yes, the Chinese experience that. Every race of people, you sometimes lose a child through an accident or disease. And well, how do you console yourself when it's happened? And a lot of people find consolence in religion. Well, I'll see my lost child again someday. Again, I mean, I know this is a state school, so I don't claim that unless somebody wants to. But anyway, again, people whose lives are devoid of any religion oftentimes have a tendency to commit suicide or go off and join some big cult. South Korea, I've talked about it, the most Christian country on the face of the earth, even though it's half Buddhist. But any given Sunday, they have the highest percentage of church attendance of any country. The South Koreans put out two types of cars now, and they've been bought by each other, whether the Hyundai and the Kia. Hyundai eventually bought Kia and improved Kia's quality. And you drive down the road, you will see a lot of Kias. The Kia is still cheaper than the Hyundai, I believe. Now, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. So anyway, it seems like the Kia sells a lot more than the Hyundai. Again, if you think I'm wrong. But Korea is still divided, and still they take shots at each other. Of course, you may know South Korea made news. They sent a bunch of their high school seniors to on a boat cruise, and the boat hit the rock, and most of them were killed. This time, they don't blame the North Koreans. Singapore and Hong Kong, I've already talked about Singapore. In the case of Hong Kong, they were taken over Britain in 1899, I believe, and promised by the British will turn you loose in 1997. Well, 1997 came around and Britain kept its word and gave them back to China. But in the meantime, a lot of Chinese refugees fleeing communism had fled to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong had a huge population. These countries are called little tigers. The Singapore and Hong Kong are the smallest. All right. The only thing I want to remember about New Zealand, and I'll close, nuclear testing is often done far in the Pacific because it's the most isolated part of the earth away from the South Pacific, but New Zealand is the closest island to it, and they object to the world doing its nuclear testing. Particularly the United States and Russia have tested nuclear weapons in the South Pacific. Today, that has been largely stopped. The United States does its nuclear testing mostly underground, and I don't know where Russia does there, but Russia used to do their testing far off in Siberia or go to the South Pacific where there weren't that many inhabited islands. Australia and New Zealand objected to that. Again, your book doesn't say much about Australia and New Zealand in modern times, even though from time to time they make news. All right.